The kiss lasted exactly 3 seconds. 3 seconds that would change everything for Ellie Matthews. As his firm lips pressed against hers, a stranger's lips, she felt an electric current run through her body that had nothing to do with the 2 vodka sodas she'd consumed. What she didn't know was that the serious-faced man she'd just kissed on a dare owned half the city's power grid. And he hadn't been kissed in 5 years, not since his wife died leaving him alone with their daughter. If you're enjoying this story so far, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more emotional stories that will tug at your heartstrings. Your support means everything. Ellie Matthews hadn't planned on kissing anyone that night. In fact, she'd only agreed to go out because her best friend Tasha had practically dragged her from the apartment they shared, insisting that 6 months of mourning a broken engagement was enough. You need to remember what fun feels like, Tasha had declared, rifling through Ellie's closet for something that wasn't sweatpants. The bar was crowded, music pulsing through the dimly lit space as bodies swayed and drinks flowed. Ellie felt out of place, like she was wearing someone else's skin. At 32, she suddenly felt too old for this scene, too worn down by life's disappointments to participate in the carefree atmosphere. "Stop looking like you're at a funeral," Tasha shouted over the music, sliding another drink toward her. "We're here to celebrate your rebirth." "My what?" Ellie laughed despite herself. "Your rebirth. The new Ellie. The one who doesn't let that jerk Richard define her worth." Ellie took a sip of her drink, letting the cool liquid burn down her throat. Maybe Tasha was right. Maybe she did need to remember who she was before Richard had walked out, claiming he needed space, only to be engaged to his 24-year-old secretary 3 weeks later. "Fine," she conceded. "What does this rebirth entail exactly?" Tasha's eyes lit up with mischief as she scanned the bar. "Truth or dare?" "What are we, 16? Truth or dare, Ellie?" Ellie sighed. "Dare. At least it would give her something to do besides overthink her life choices." Tasha's gaze continued to sweep the room until it landed on something, or someone, that made her smile widen. "See that guy at the end of the bar? The one in the charcoal suit who looks like he's calculating his taxes in his head?" Ellie followed her friend's gaze. The man sat alone, his posture rigid as he nursed what appeared to be whiskey. He was handsome in a severe way, strong jawline, dark hair with distinguished touches of silver at the temples, and eyes that seemed to be looking through the room rather than at it. He was older than most patrons, maybe late 30s or early 40s, and completely out of place in the Friday night revelry. "I dare you to go kiss him," Tasha said, her voice triumphant. "What? No. That's assault. Not a full makeout session. Just a peck. Blame it on a dare if he gets upset." "Tasha, I can't just. The old Ellie would say that." "What about the reborn Ellie?" Ellie looked at the man again. There was something compelling about his isolation, the invisible wall he seemed to have built around himself. She recognized it because she'd been constructing her own walls for months. "Fine," she said, downing the rest of her drink for courage. "But if I get arrested for harassment, you're paying my bail." Her heart hammered against her ribs as she made her way through the crowd. What was she doing? This wasn't her. She didn't kiss strangers in bars. She was a kindergarten teacher who went to bed at 9 and spent Saturdays at the farmer's market. The man didn't notice her approach, still staring into his drink as if it held answers to questions she couldn't imagine. Up close, she could see the fine lines around his eyes, the slight furrow between his brows that suggested he frowned often. "Excuse me," she said, her voice barely audible over the music. He looked up, his eyes a startling shade of blue, not warm like a summer sky but cool like the deepest part of the ocean. For a moment, Ellie forgot why she was standing there. "Can I help you?" His voice was deep, with a slight rasp that suggested he didn't use it often. "I'm really sorry about this," she said, and before she could lose her nerve, she leaned down and pressed her lips to his. The world seemed to stop. His lips were surprisingly soft, contrasting with the rigid shock of his body. She meant to pull away immediately, to laugh it off and retreat, but something held her there for those 3 seconds, a connection, a spark, a moment of warmth in what had been months of cold emptiness. When she pulled back, his eyes were wide with shock, his composure completely shattered. Ellie felt her face flame with embarrassment. "I'm so sorry," she stammered. "It was a dare and I..." "Dad?" A small voice interrupted her apology. Ellie turned to see a young girl, perhaps 9 or 10, standing there with wide eyes that matched the man's. "Is she your girlfriend?" The mortification that washed over Ellie was complete. Not only had she kissed a stranger, but she'd done it in front of his child. "No, I'm not, I was just..." "Lily, this is..." The man started, then realized he didn't know her name. "Ellie," she supplied, wishing the floor would open up and swallow her whole. "And I was just leaving. I'm so sorry." She turned to flee, but his voice stopped her. "Wait." Ellie froze, certain he was about to berate her or call security. "I'm Daniel," he said instead. "Daniel Westbrook." Daniel Westbrook hadn't planned on being kissed that night. In fact, he hadn't planned on being in the bar at all. He'd only stopped in because his daughter's babysitter had cancelled last minute, and he needed to meet with an important client who refused to reschedule. The client had insisted on this particular bar, claiming the atmosphere was more relaxed than Daniel's usual choice of upscale restaurants. Relaxed was not a word in Daniel's vocabulary, not since Megan had died 5 years ago, leaving him to raise their daughter alone while running Westbrook Power, the company his grandfather had founded and his father had expanded. Now, as CEO, Daniel controlled the power supply for half the city, managed thousands of employees, and made decisions that affected millions of lives. But none of that prepared him for the responsibility of being both mother and father to Lily. He'd brought her along to the meeting, something he rarely did, but the client had assured him it would be brief. Just a signature on some papers that couldn't wait until Monday. The client had been late, of course, and now Daniel sat at the bar, watching the minutes tick by on his expensive watch while Lily sipped her Shirley Temple and asked questions about the colorful bottles behind the bar. "Why do grown-ups like to drink stuff that makes them silly?" she'd asked, her perceptive eyes taking in the increasingly rowdy crowd. "Not all grown-ups do," he'd answered, thinking of how he limited himself to one drink on the rare occasions he indulged at all. Control was everything in his world, control over his company, his emotions, his life. And then a woman with honey blonde hair and eyes the color of amber had appeared before him, apologized, and pressed her lips to his. In that moment, all his carefully constructed control had evaporated. For 3 seconds, Daniel Westbrook had been just a man being kissed by a beautiful woman, not a CEO, not a widower, not a single father carrying the weight of too many responsibilities. When she pulled away, the shock must have been evident on his face. He couldn't remember the last time he'd been caught off guard. Certainly not since Megan's diagnosis, when the doctor had said, terminal, and the world had shifted beneath his feet. Then Lily had appeared, her question hanging in the air, "Is she your girlfriend?" And Daniel had watched the woman's, Ellie's, face transform from embarrassment to mortification. She'd tried to leave, and something had compelled him to stop her. To tell her his name. "I'm Daniel," he'd said. "Daniel Westbrook." Recognition flickered in her eyes, as it often did when he introduced himself. Westbrook was a name everyone in the city knew, associated with power in more ways than one. "As in Westbrook Power?" she asked, her voice small. He nodded, used to this reaction. People either wanted something from him or were intimidated by him. Sometimes both. "I really am sorry," she said again. "My friend dared me and..." "It's okay," he interrupted, surprising himself. It wasn't okay. It was inappropriate and unexpected and completely outside the carefully ordered parameters of his life. And yet, he couldn't bring himself to be angry. "It's been a long time since anyone's kissed me on a dare." A small smile tugged at her lips. Do people usually have other reasons for kissing you? The question caught him off guard again. Was she flirting with him? He couldn't remember the last time someone had flirted with him either. Not lately, he admitted. Dad, Lily tugged at his sleeve. The man with the papers is here. Daniel looked up to see his client approaching, briefcase in hand. I have to take care of this, he told Ellie. But maybe I should go, she said quickly. Again, I'm sorry for the interruption. Before he could respond, she had disappeared into the crowd. Daniel watched her go, feeling an unfamiliar sensation in his chest, regret, perhaps, or a missed opportunity. Then he turned his attention to his client, pushing thoughts of soft lips and amber eyes aside. The meeting was brief, as promised. Papers signed, handshakes exchanged, and then Daniel was guiding Lily through the now-packed bar toward the exit. It was well past her bedtime, and he had early meetings the next day. Life would return to its orderly progression. Except, as they neared the door, he saw her again. Ellie. She was with a dark-haired woman who was gesturing animatedly, both of them laughing. Daniel couldn't remember the last time he'd laughed like that, freely, without reservation. Dad, look! It's the kissing lady! Lily said, loudly enough that several heads turned, including Ellie's. Their eyes met across the room, and Daniel felt that same jolt he'd experienced when her lips touched his. Without thinking, he changed course, guiding Lily toward Ellie and her friend. We meet again, he said when they reached her. Ellie's cheeks flushed pink. I was hoping to escape without further embarrassment. Actually, I wanted to thank you, Daniel said. Her eyebrows rose in surprise. Thank me? For assaulting you in public? For reminding me that unexpected things can sometimes be pleasant. The blush deepened, spreading down her neck. Oh. I'm Lily, his daughter interjected, extending her hand formally as he'd taught her. Are you really not Dad's girlfriend? Because he needs one. Aunt Claire says he's turning into a robot. Lily, Daniel admonished, though there was truth in his sister's assessment. He had become mechanical in many ways, going through the motions of life without really living it. I'm Ellie, she replied, shaking Lily's hand with equal formality. And no, I'm not your dad's girlfriend. We just met. But you kissed him, Lily pointed out with a child's logic. People who kiss are usually boyfriends and girlfriends. Or married. Or in movies. Sometimes, Ellie's friend chimed in, people kiss because they're dared to by their well-meaning but slightly evil best friends. She extended her hand to Daniel. I'm Tasha, by the way. The evil mastermind behind tonight's entertainment. Daniel shook her hand, finding himself amused rather than offended. Daniel Westbrook. Tasha's eyes widened slightly. As in. Yes, Ellie cut her off. He knows who he is, Tash. An awkward silence fell over the group, broken only by the pulsing music and surrounding conversations. Well, Daniel finally said, we should be going. It's past Lily's bedtime. It was nice meeting you, Ellie said, her eyes meeting his with a sincerity that caught him off guard again. And again, I'm sorry about the misunderstanding. Daniel hesitated, then reached into his pocket for a business card. Perhaps we could clear up any misunderstandings over coffee sometime? The word surprised him as much as they seemed to surprise her. Daniel Westbrook didn't ask women out for coffee. He didn't ask women out at all. His life was structured around work and Lily, with no room for complications like dating. Ellie took the card, her fingers brushing his in a way that sent another small current through him. I'd like that, she said softly. As Daniel led Lily out of the bar and into the cool night air, he felt something he hadn't experienced in years, a sense of anticipation, of possibility. It was unsettling and exhilarating all at once. I like her, Lily declared as they walked to where their driver waited with the car. She has kind eyes. Daniel thought about Ellie's amber eyes, the warmth in them even as she'd apologized for her impulsive action. Yes, he agreed. She does. Ellie stared at the business card in her hand, the embossed letters catching the light. Daniel Westbrook, CEO, Westbrook Power. A phone number and email address, nothing personal. Just like the man himself had seemed, formal, contained, until that kiss had cracked something in his carefully maintained facade. Are you going to call him? Tasha asked, peering over her shoulder at the card. I don't know, Ellie admitted. He's intimidating. He's hot, Tasha corrected. In that brooding, powerful, I could buy this entire bar with my pocket change kind of way. He has a daughter. So? You love kids. You teach them for a living. Ellie tucked the card into her purse, unsure why she was hesitating. Daniel Westbrook was handsome, successful, and had seemed genuinely interested in seeing her again. But there was a vulnerability in his eyes that had caught her off guard, a depth of feeling that suggested complications she wasn't sure she was ready for. Let's just enjoy the rest of the night, she said, pushing thoughts of serious single dads aside. Wasn't this about my rebirth, or whatever? But as the night wore on, Ellie found her thoughts returning to those 3 seconds, to the unexpected connection she'd felt with a stranger. By the time she crawled into bed that night, the business card had migrated from her purse to her bedside table, where it sat like a promise, or a challenge. 3 days passed before Ellie worked up the courage to call the number on the card. 3 days of debating with herself, of Tasha's encouragement, of staring at the embossed letters until they blurred before her eyes. When she finally dialed, she half hoped it would go to voicemail. Instead, a crisp female voice answered. Mr. Westbrook's office. Of course he had a secretary. He was the CEO of a major company. What had she expected? Oh, hi, Ellie stammered. This is Ellie Matthews. Daniel, Mr. Westbrook gave me his card and suggested we might get coffee? There was a pause, then, 1 moment, please. Ellie waited, her heart pounding. This was a mistake. He'd probably forgotten all about her. Or worse, regretted giving her his card in a moment of weakness. Ellie? His voice came through the line, that same deep rasp that had sent shivers down her spine. Yes, hi. I hope I'm not interrupting anything important. Nothing that can't wait, he said, and she could hear the smile in his voice. I was beginning to think you wouldn't call. I almost didn't, she admitted. You're a bit intimidating, you know. Am I? He sounded genuinely surprised. You're Daniel Westbrook. You run the company that keeps the lights on in half the city. And you wear suits to bars on Friday nights. He chuckled, a warm sound that made her smile. The suit was for a meeting. I don't usually frequent bars, especially not with my daughter in tow. About that, Ellie said, I really am sorry for kissing you in front of her. That must have been awkward to explain. Actually, she's been asking about you. The kiss.